We bring in a friend who we've known for years and years and years. He's an author, relationship therapist, Dr. R.G. Alan Wilson.
Some expert advice on how we can all talk to them. Joining us now is relationship expert Dr. R.G. Alan Wilson. She's the author of Courageous Conversations Connect. Good morning, R.G.
Doctor, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, Janelle. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
And as we mentioned, a lot of people just dealing with anxiety during all of this. What are your suggestions?
Some of the things that we need to remember is that this is temporary. This is temporary inconvenience for long-term gain. And as long as we stay healthy, Janelle, then everything else is recoverable.
Talk to your children about what's happening right now. What are the best ways to do that?
There's some do's and don'ts, right? So you want to tell them that you're going to be here. We're going to be okay. Kids want to know that they're secure and they're safe. So predictability, structure, and consistency. You also want to let them know you have a plan. And even if you don't have a plan, tell them that you're working on one. And good morning, everyone. This is the Courageous Conversations Connect space, and we are having our quarantine talks with yours truly, Dr. R.G. Welcome to the show. This is July 6, 2020. This is week 17, believe it or not, in quarantine. And this is our 55th episode of Quarantine Talk. So, oh my goodness, welcome to the show. We had a little bit of a break last week. So thank you for being patient, and thank you for coming back and sharing with our crew, connecting relationships for epic wins. I already see Charla on. Good morning, Charla. We're going to wait for a few more people to come on. Good morning, IG family. Good morning, Facebook family. Good morning, YouTube family. Yep. This is our crew, connecting relationships for epic wins, and we are excited to be back this week. I missed you. I don't know. I hope you guys missed us, but we certainly missed you. Good morning, R.L. Reed, Mr. Reed. That is Kimberly Reed's father. Thank you for joining the show. We so appreciate you supporting us all the time, and we've got a great week set up for you guys. I've been thinking all last week after we've gone through Juneteenth, after we've gone through July 4th, if you will. Good morning, Tyra Bird is on. Thanks for joining the show, sweetie. After all of that, I decided that, when I was sort of kind of praying and thinking about what it is that I wanted us to talk about this week, and I came up with don't quit. So all week, that is going to be our mantra for the shows that we have, don't quit. And we're specifically talking about both COVID-19 and racial healing conversations. And so that's what we're going to be talking about this week. Today, you just have me, yours truly. On Wednesday, we're going to have of course, my good friend, one of my besties, Charlie Lewis, on the show. And so you all have heard me talk about Charlie. I do his show on Tuesday night, the Charlie Lewis show. And we're going to be talking about, I think, COVID-19 or quarantine fatigue, but he'll be on Wednesday morning with us, so you don't want to miss that. And then on Thursday, we're going to have a new friend of mine that I actually met when I was on the Tamron Hall show. Her name is Leah Love Avalani, and we're going to be talking about how do you have these racial healing talks, how do white women and Black women have racial healing talks to move the needle forward with regards to dismantling systemic racism. That's going to be awesome. If you all remember, a couple of weeks ago, we had Mel Robbins on, and she was absolutely amazing. We'll probably re-air that segment as well. And I think Leah is going to be amazing. I'm looking forward to that conversation with you guys as well. So listen, we are going to stay on board. I want you all to think about who you're breathing for, because we're going to take a quick break from our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to do our breathing exercises. We know that we do that for whoever we want to breathe for, ourselves as well as other people. And then we get into the conversation. Okay. So we'll take a quick break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. welcome back to the Courageous Conversations Connect space, our quarantine talks. Can y'all believe it? This is Dr. RG here, 17 weeks in quarantine. Now, that's not for everyone. We've gone, I think, in this region to yellow. We went from red to yellow. I think some regions are green in these areas, which means that like restaurants are opening back up. They started with outdoor seating and curbside delivery. Now some places are open inside or they have tents, but then there are other places that they opened up and then the COVID numbers started skyrocketing again. And so they kind of ratcheted that back, especially during the holiday weekend, and went back to, I think, from green back to yellow. Unfortunately, I think because everybody is not socially distancing, some people are wearing masks, some people are not wearing masks. That's become a political talking point, if you will, with regards to people, either whether they're wearing masks or they're not. And unfortunately, there are a lot of numbers that are going up. I see Larissa on, I see Treasure on. Thank you for joining the show. So listen, as we think about this conversation, and I want to hear your stories, I was really thinking about like, how do we keep it going? And I came up with Don't Quit. So all week we're going to be talking about how do we stay in the fight? How do we stay in the conversation? How do we not quit? So with that in mind, I want to hear your story. So I want you guys to think about the stories that you're going to share with our crew, Connecting Relationships for Epic Wins. And in that process, while you're thinking about that, tell me who you're breathing for, because we're about to go into our breathing exercises this morning. Of course, a couple of weeks ago, I was breathing, and I think still, I'm going to say that as we do our breathing exercises, I'm breathing for the families of George Floyd, the families of Breonna Taylor, the families of Ahmaud Arbery, and the family of Rayshard Brooks. Those are people that were killed at the hands of police officers or what I call white vigilantes for no good reason and other than they're Black. And in this era, we have to dismantle all the structures that have been built up to keep Black people oppressed and to keep many white people elevated in positions of power and privilege, right? So I'm breathing for them, but I've not forgotten, I don't know about you all, but I'm not forgotten that we're in the midst of two pandemics, right? We're in the midst of COVID-19 as well as systemic racism. So there are still essential workers out there that are putting themselves in harm's way, like medical doctors and physicians. The Black Doctors COVID-19 Consortium is still out there testing in the streets of Philadelphia in the tri-state area. But there are also people like grocery store workers and pharmacy workers and bus drivers and gate agents because people are flying again during the holiday, what have you. I see Amazon trucks. There are people that are putting themselves in harm's way while these numbers are continuing to escalate. So who are you breathing for and with as we go into our breathing exercises? Breathing is essential, right? Think about the term, the statement, I can't breathe. A lot of people who unfortunately come down with COVID-19, they say that this particular virus impacts the respiratory system, so people can't breathe, right? And oftentimes they were put on ventilators, which they now finding out that might not have been the best course of treatment for them. And so they're having better forms of treatment, which then means they're having better outcomes, but it still affects people's ability to breathe. The same thing is happening with people in the streets, oftentimes where they're not able to breathe. And I say from the streets to the suites, right? So whether you're in the street and you're stopped by an officer and you're doing the right thing, let's hope, and you're still having to deal with, like George Floyd, a knee on the neck where he could not breathe, or Eric Gardner, or in the suites, quite frankly, where many Black and brown people are working hard, yet they're not able to breathe because of the systemic racism, because of the inequities, because of the social injustices. And that is a form of not being able to breathe as well. Larissa says, I'm breathing for grocery store workers. Thank you for that, Larissa. And Tyra says, I'm breathing for the Ricky Smiley family whose daughter was shot last night. I think I saw that. I think I saw something like that. Yeah. Yeah, but I was like,
a shooting and when he got shot years ago, he was just on posted like a couple of days
really?
Ago, he posted all about that.
Well, we're praying for Ricky Smiley's daughter. Oh my goodness gracious. There are a lot of guns out there, and sometimes we don't even know what's the difference between gunshots and the fireworks. So yes, prayers up for Ricky Smiley's family. So guys, let's get into our posture. You know what we do. We get comfortable. We put our middle finger to our thumb, right? Or you can put your hands, one hand over the neck and put it on your lap or on your sides. You do a little shake to get yourself relaxed, back erect. And we're going to breathe in through our nose, hold it for 8 seconds. I do 8 seconds in honor of George Floyd, who had a knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And then 2 more minutes after that, after he stopped breathing. So we're going to do it for 8 seconds. I'll hold my fingers up and then we'll let it out through our mouths. We're also breathing in oxygen and breathing out carbon dioxide and breathing in love and light and care and kindness and grace and peace and serenity and calm. And then we're breathing out fear and pain and stress and worry and anxiety, those things, okay? So we're right on time. It's about 10:10. At the sound of my voice, when I count to 3, we'll breathe in. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. And out. One last time. Make it count, guys. Breathe in. Good one. And out. Good. That's good. That felt good to me. I don't know about you. I want you all to continue to do that throughout the day. You have no idea the number of us people that have shallow breathing, right? Where we're talking, we're moving and shaking throughout the day, and we're not getting all that good oxygen to the essential places that it needs to be, our brain and our organs, in order for that blood flow to be at its optimal potential, right? So for us to be able to breathe. So continue to do that throughout the day. So we're going to get into our stories. As I said this weekend, I hope everyone had a good weekend. The weather was beautiful and here in the Philadelphia region. And there was 4th of July. And it was interesting. I was talking to Morgan and I was saying, you know, it's not just this year, but it's been a couple of years for me that I've not known really how to deal with the whole 4th of July thing, right? Because it's supposed to represent independence. But as we know, for Black and brown people, that level of independence has not been the thing for us, right? It has not been the way in which we've lived our lives with full freedom and independence in this yet to be United States of America, right? And so although we were free from the British, there were still many, many years where Black and brown people were oppressed. And then systems were elevated and structures were built in every facet of our lives, in the educational system, in the, in the economic system, in the workforce, in the political system. There were structures that were built up, and unfortunately, those structures did not service many of us well. So I kind of have a quandary about the whole 4th of July. I know we get it off, and I know people barbecue and they have a good time. And certainly I did have a good time over the years. Usually it was the year that we had our family reunion. So it's a time for us to kind of come together. But in terms of representing the meaning of it, I've had a difficult time and struggling with that. That said, this weekend was good. It was relaxing and spent it with family. And I thought a lot about when we came back from our little vacation from the show, what we would talk about that would inspire us. This show is about us having a safe place to have the courageous conversation and the quarantine talks, right? And to talk about the things that are upsetting to us, the things that we're worried about, the things that we're anxious about, and a way to externalize our emotions. And so we're talking all week about how do we not quit? So I want you to think about that. The conversation is don't quit. Specifically, we're talking about not quitting when it comes to the intersectionality of these two viruses, COVID-19, which is a one virus, right? That they're specifically talking about how do we test? We had a test and then we track and then we trace so that we can isolate and then we hopefully come up with a vaccine that will be the treatment, right? So that's one virus. And then for quite frankly, people are pretty fatigued because the people have been honoring the quarantine, 17 weeks of quarantine, are a little fatigued about having to stay in and not be able to go out. And then they can go to restaurants, but they're not sure which ones they can go that are safe. And it's been a lot. People are overwhelmed. Most households, or a lot of households, at least in the practice and what I'm seeing, they're a little bit of a tinderbox, really. When I say tinderbox, I mean people's emotions are a little frazzled and people are a little fragile right now. And oftentimes you're having arguments that typically people wouldn't be arguing about. And now it's the most benign thing and people are having these big blowups. And no family is immune to it, if you will. So that's COVID-19. And then you've got this 401-year virus, right? Systemic racism that we're trying to deal with and trying to unpack. And even Morgan and I were talking about how both white and Black people and brown people have all in this, we're all in this together, right? We grew up under a system that was meant to oppress and to degrade and segregate us and, you know, in many ways, other us. And many white people grew up in a system too, right? And they grew up in a system to elevate, to give them unearned power and privilege. And if think about if it were reversed, and if the Black folks were growing up in a system where we were given unearned privilege, we might not want to give it up either. So that's why we have to stay in the conversation. That's why we can't quit now. The thing about it is that most things that are worth having are difficult. The things that cause us to elevate ourselves, to move forward, to be healthier, those are the things that are difficult, yet they're the things that are most rewarding if we don't quit. I see China on. Thanks, China, for joining. So can you share for the crew, if you have a story or if you have a thought about something that has gotten hard for you in the last 17 weeks, where you wanted to quit and you said, nope, I'm not going to. Or if you're transparent, we believe in truth, trust, and transparency leads to transformational breakthroughs. So if you're transparent, maybe you did quit. What is it that you quit? And you said, you know, I'm not doing this anymore. And then maybe you were convicted about it. What I know for sure, one thing for certain, two for sure, is that if we quit in the middle, we will never see what the end will reveal, right? We're not going to be in any of this. None of this lasts forever. That's the trick of the enemy. Sometimes we think it's lasting forever because we feel like we thought this was going to be a sprint. I told you all, like, well, I don't know, months ago that Morgan and I, we thought this was going to last for about 2 weeks. And we kind of got ahead of the curve and set up the practice from online. And we sent out letters and saying, we're going to do the online practice for 2 weeks. And here we are 4 months later, and we're still in the midst of a quarantine. That sometimes doesn't feel good. And so what's your story? How have you been dealing with the intersection of these two pandemics? Quite frankly, these two viruses. Have you dealt with super spreaders? Y'all know who the super spreaders are, right? They're the people out there who are asymptomatic and they don't know it when it comes to the virus, and they're out there spreading it. And it's also people who are spreading racism. We call them super spreaders as well. Karen says, I was ready to give up on meeting my future husband. Don't give up on that, Karen. That's interesting, because I've seen and talked to a lot of people who are also saying, Karen, that dating in the midst of this quarantine is difficult, right? Yet I've also talked to other people who have said that they've started some online dating and they've been actually starting to be successful at connecting with very interesting people. So sometimes it's just a matter of your perception. I had a friend that said one day, Don't allow your perception to screw up your reception, right? Your perception is how you perceive it. If you think it's not happening, it's not going to happen, like you're saying, you're about to give up on your future husband. But don't do that. Don't quit before the miracle happens, right? Good morning, Renee.
Why do you think dating has been a little easier now for COVID? Just curious.
Well, that's a good question, Morgan. Morgan saying, why do I think that dating is a little bit easier now? I think, again, it's a matter of perception. For some people, they are determined to continue in the path of finding or receiving their future partner, and they're realizing that I can't quit now. I also think there are other people that are challenged by innovation, by technology. They're a little afraid of it. And so therefore, because we can't get out, they then make it becomes more difficult because they can't go out and meet people in the normal ways that we would actually meet people. I think that if you challenge yourself, tap into your own resources. Don't completely tap out yet. Tap into the resources that you have. Utilize the technology as it's meant to be utilized. There are dating sites that are really creating new innovative ways to actually do the online dating without ever actually going out. And I've heard people actually doing socially distanced dates because now the weather's nice. So you can go out to walk in the park, wear your mask, in a highly populated area where it's safe, right? And have a good time and then see. But if you quit, then how will you ever know? Is anybody on IG?
Allison's on. Joe
Hey,
Bud's
Allison.
on.
Good morning, Joe.
The _ Gregaria. I don't know who he is.
Good morning.
Let's see. Nikki's on.
Hey, Nikki.
People on.
Okay. Anyone willing to share your story of what you either quit or what you did not quit? This is about staying in the conversation. And I will tell you, the conversation is hard, right? This is why people quit the conversation. We were watching service yesterday online, and our pastor said that, have you ever experienced people in a generation that have, their claim to fame is that they almost did something? That's what we call it, our clinicians, our psychologists, we call it ABD. Like, it stands for all but dissertation. Like, you did everything but complete it. And so because you don't feel good about not completing it and getting the final degree, then you say, well, I almost did. Well, in this situation, we can't just say we got to keep in it. We got to stay in it. Carla, hey, Carla, good morning. Thank you. Yeah, see you later on tonight. That's right, for our Jack and Jill event. She says, I would think that dating would be more efficient, being that you don't have to go anywhere. Laugh out loud. That's right. Efficient in that you save money, right? You don't really necessarily have to spend a whole lot of money taking somebody to dinner or a jazz concert or what have you. Now, mind you, if you actually make a connection with someone that you're dating online and you don't go anywhere, then after all this is over, really, people are going to expect that you're going to go out and spend some money and have a good time and do some fun things. But for now, yeah, you're right. It might be easier, might be more efficient. You actually might get to know the person even better because you have less distractions, right? Because I've never even fully understood why people actually go on a first date or a second date, like to the movies, for example. Like, how are you really going to get to know the person if you're at the movies watching the movie as opposed to sitting down and asking them, questions about life and what their favorite color is and what their values are? By the way, since we're talking about the whole dating, I have a client who has I've encouraged to date themselves. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about that. Speaking about Courageous Conversations, you all know in Courageous Conversations Connect, right? This is the book that I wrote, A Pathway to Reset Your Mindset with Intentional Thoughts from the Inside Out. The first chapter I start out with is Radical Self-Care in Action. And I ask people to start having a courageous conversation with themselves. And so I have in action, radical self-care in action. And so, the premise of the book is to have people go through 52 weeks of Courageous Conversations. So it starts out the first week, Courageous Conversations. I give them sort of a guide to the Courageous Conversation, and then I give them the steps, the action steps by which to think about that particular courageous conversation. And then there's an area where they can actually journal. So this particular client of mine, I said, well, why don't you have a date with yourself? Why don't you get to know you? Because she was saying that she sort of felt like a blank slate. And when people asked her questions about herself, she really didn't have the answers. And I said, well, think about when you're on a date. When you're on a date, what is the thing that you actually want to do? What is even the purpose of dating? It's really to get to know that person. So you have questions in your head about what are their values and what are their future hopes, wishes, and dreams, and where did they come from? Who are their family? Who are they connected to? How is it that they actually want to move forward in the future? And so if those questions are important to you, perhaps maybe you have to ask yourself those questions so that you begin to prepare yourself for whomever, if you're a single person, whoever you are going to meet in the future. Because I don't believe in coincidences. I actually believe that preparation meets opportunity. And so you've ever heard the statement that when the student is ready, the teacher shows up? And I kind of use that statement the same way as when the client is ready, the therapist shows up, right? And so when you're actually thinking about these things, then it begins to be important for you to then communicate that to yourself. And so, good morning, Debbie. Debbie's on. Thank you for joining the show. Share your story. What have you focused on in the last couple of weeks? There's been a lot of stuff happening, right? And by the way, you all know I'm not a proponent of staying on, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. What else is there? TikTok, Snapchat, IG, right? Don't stay on those things all day long, right? Because sometimes, that can zap your energy as well. Wherever you get your news from, morning, watch it, maybe in the evening. But, the thing about watching something and imagery, especially the negative imagery, I feel like in social media, there's an uptick of it because everybody's videotaping things now. So there's an uptick of fights that are happening, racial and cultural wars that are happening. But like I said, the tinderbox, everyone is very uptight, very anxious. They're not very patient. And so there's like a lot of fights happening. I don't know if you all have experienced that, but how do you then protect your peace so that you can stay in healthy conversation? Not only about COVID-19, but also about the racial unrest. I want y'all to think about that because I think it's very important. I wanted to read this. No, go ahead. Oh yeah. I sent that to Morgan a little bit earlier. I guess it was yesterday. Came across my Facebook page, I think, and there was a white woman and her husband. They had a pickup truck and they had some black paint. I don't know if tell me if y'all saw that. They had some black paint in the truck and they actually started painting over the Black Lives Matter, emblem, if you will, that is in the middle of the street. The mayor of DC actually started it. I thought it was a very, very bold move. And then a lot of the other cities began to do it. And so people are outraged about this and they feel like it is impeding upon their civil rights, if you will. So this white woman and her husband took a bucket of black paint and they were literally painting over the actual letters, Black Lives Matter. And so another couple who were Native Americans were actually challenging them and saying, like, listen, why are you defaming this property? And we were here first, the Native Americans. And so the woman was like challenging this woman, saying, no, you weren't. And the woman was saying, this is about immigration. You all are immigrants. And, it got into a really nasty argument. It didn't turn into a fight, at least the part that I saw. But there was quite a few comments on IG, like that she was actually painting the letters that were yellow black. And I thought that was kind of interesting because I was like, does she realize that she's just painting over the yellow black, but people are still going to see Black Lives Matter unless you like paint the whole thing. But even beyond that, when we're talking about racial healing, Michael Brown said, yes, I saw that. Where do we need to get? what was I going to say? I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. When we're talking about racial healing, right? What does that really mean? What, if we're just fighting each other, how far do we move the needle? I think that, quite frankly, people don't want to have the racial conversations because they're uncomfortable, because they feel like that perhaps they're going to be labeled, like either like labeled as a racist or labeled as a fascist or labeled something that they don't like. And they also are afraid that they will lose out. And what I'm saying is that we have to stay in the conversation. And it's important, right? It's important for our very livelihood, because we're really all on this planet together. So what does it require? Let's talk about that. What does it require to stay in the conversation? And by the way, young people are having a different conversation than other people, the older people. I'm talking about the Gen Zs and the millennials. That is a very different conversation than the baby boomers, if you will, and even the next generation. And we've got to figure out how to bridge that gap if we're going to move the needle forward, because oftentimes that keeps us stuck and paralyzed. Carla says, I think the conversations reveal that they lack information. Education. Absolutely right, Carla, right? But here's the thing that I've also realized. There are some people out there that don't want the information. They are more comfortable. You ever heard the statement, ignorance is bliss? Well, I don't really think ignorance is bliss, but I do think that people will choose to not learn, to not move forward with educating themselves. And the truth is, like, Black people are tired of educating white people and sharing with you, okay, this has been our experience. What we want, and this is the conversation that I'm going to have with Leah Love Avalani on Thursday, I believe, is how do we stay in it? How do we not quit, even if it's uncomfortable? Mel Robbins said that she was talking to her children and her children's about racial inequities and about just being racist and, being born into a system where everything is stacked up for you and everything is stacked against people of color. And her kids said, Mom, it's hard to have this conversation. And Mel Robbins said, good, because if it's hard for you to have the conversation, think about how hard it is for Black people and brown people to live the conversation. And I thought that was a great way to continue in the conversation. So let's keep it going. Tell me your stories. When we come back, we're going to take a quick break from our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to unpack what it feels like to live in the midst of a storm. All right, stay with us. And welcome back to Courageous Conversations Connect Space, where we are having our quarantine talks. And we've been talking about how not to quit and all this racial unrest that's going on in COVID-19. Michael says, as long as I don't know you, it makes it easier to disrespect you. Right, exactly. So it's about getting to know each other, KNOW. Tyrone says, it's important to stay in the conversation. We need to understand how our biases impact our behavior and how our behavior hurts others based on our ignorance. When we choose not to be informed, we also choose not to be accountable. Absolutely. Absolutely, Tyrone. And Larissa says, I am learning to become accustomed to the new reality. I don't know when or if it will ever end. I openly reveal my fears and feelings with God. My hope and faith is increased through reading his word. Awesome, Larissa. Awesome. The thing about the end is that although we're in a marathon with this COVID-19 and with this racial unrest, I'm not sure if I believe that. I know COVID, that's going to end. They're going to get a vaccine or what have you, and that will end eventually. As far as the racial unrest, that's why we have to stay in the conversation, and that's why we have to continue to move towards dismantling be anti-racist. And we need white people and Black people. We need white allies in this conversation, babe.
Yeah, I'm just curious to know for the crew if anybody's had a courageous conversation with a white friend or family member, for example, or coworker, and what was that like? What did you do? What did you say? Was it contentious? Do you think you made some inroads, some ways to help them understand what's going on or how we're feeling as a people? Just curious to know what's that experience been like.
That's a good question, babe. I wonder if Black people are experiencing some fatigue too, in terms of always initiating the conversations. Now, I do know that you and I have talked about this, and some of our family members have experienced white allies calling them, checking on them, and saying, "Are you okay?" and being willing to have a conversation about how perhaps they haven't. Like, I've heard people say, "I'm embarrassed that I didn't know," or that maybe I didn't realize that this was that difficult for you still in 2020. I really don't know any Black people who are driving around but never have had any kind of experience with racism at the highest levels or at the lowest levels. The thing that's insidious about it is that at the highest level, sometimes it's very covert. It's not as if you can point the finger and say, that's racist, right?
Right.
Because people will say, well, you're just overqualified for the job. So, hey, that's, I'm sorry about that. And they can't just point their finger at it. Carla says, my white neighbors asked my husband and I could speak to their four children about how BLM impacts us. It was a great family conversation. Wow.
Interesting.
Wow.
Give us more details on that. What was that experience like,
to
Carla?
Talk to their four children about that.
Awesome.
And what I wonder, Carla, is when you and your husband talk to their four children about the Black Lives Matter movement, what was the response from the four children about your experience? Were they open to it, or did they just take it in and absorb it and not just listen? Because here's the thing about that, and I experience this in therapy oftentimes, when people open up their hearts and allow themselves to be more vulnerable to another entity, right? Maybe it's women talking to men, or it's children talking to adults, or it's one party of the couple talking to another, not specifically about these issues. When they allow themselves to be vulnerable and the people who are actually on the receiving end of that don't respond at all, they say, oh, well, thanks for sharing, and don't say anything back, like how that impacted them, it can really leave the person who rendered themselves vulnerable feeling like they've been duped. Like, I shared my heart with you, and all I'm getting back is thank you, not wow, I actually want to do something about that. What is it that I can do? And that is the question that I've been actually challenging many white people to think about. Remember, you guys, I talked about SLAC a couple of weeks ago, and I'm not sure if you all remember what SLAC stands for, but it really was an acronym to say, let's cut ourselves some slack, right? S standing for how we are showing up, right, in the space. How are white people showing up to support and be white allies for the Black Lives Matter movement? Not just saying that every time we say Black Lives Matter, the white person says all lives matter. You know what I'm saying? So how are we showing up? And then how are we leading the charge? But I added something to the L, which is to listen, learn, and then lead. Okay? So that's for white people and Black and brown people. We need to be listening to each other. Then we need to be learning how we move forward and then lead. And then the A stands for acknowledgement, because the problem with this movement, right, is that in the past, there's not been an acknowledgement of the pain and the atrocity and the brutality that Black and brown people have experienced. So there needs to be an acknowledgement for us to move forward. And then the C is commitment. That's the problem in many of our areas, that we aren't committed for the long haul. And when it gets hard, we just tap out as if we don't need to be continuing in this space. And then lastly, K stands for kind, right? My mom used to always say it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. So are you kind in this process? Or do you let your fear get the best of you and start being unkind to each other? Carla says, the entire family has always been open. The parents want their children to be empathic to all people. I could tell that the parents have done the groundwork. The kids were shocked and saddened by our stories. Even the parents' eyes were open. Wow. Those are the kind of conversations that need to happen. We also taught the kids how to be good allies. That's awesome. I applaud that family for requesting that kind of conversation from you and your husband. I applaud you all for engaging in that conversation, because we're doing this even in the midst of our fatigue, right? Because this is not a new conversation for Black people and brown people. We live it every day, right? We live it because we know that we have to have a talk with our young people about what they need to do if they're walking down the street, if they're driving while Black, or if they're walking while Black, or if they're drinking coffee while Black, or if they're bird watching while Black, or sitting and breathing while Black. We know what we need to do. And we also know that even in having that talk, that may not necessarily save their lives if they're stopped by the police. So it's personal for us. And yet we're fatigued. And you and your husband still chose to engage in that conversation to teach. The challenge, the next challenge, or I say the next step, if you will, is to take action. How are we taking action collaboratively together to break down and dismantle this systemic racism? Because, I've heard a lot of people within the practice saying that they'll get the blurb in the C-suites, right? The blurb is, we support Black Lives Matter. But this is more than just a blurb. It's more than just a paragraph. It's more than just an ed op piece, right? There is action that needs to be taken to change policies and procedures and structures that have been built up for over 400 years. That's the problem. We need to break the barriers down, and we need to stay in the conversation. So great that you're having that. We need to have more of that. Who's on IG and what do they say? Okay. So we haven't had any storms in a while. The last time we had a storm, it was really interesting. Morgan and I were in the house and the power went out. And it stayed out for like till 3 in the morning, something like that. And we were not like really fully prepared for the power to be out, to be honest with you, for that long period of time. And I kind of thought about that because a lot of times when we're going through storms, we're not always prepared. We don't have what we need, whether it be a conversation, whether it be equipment or what have you. But, what about like emotional storms? Have you, like when we're thinking about the stories that we need to be having or stories in our head, I know that over the last month or so, I've been having flashbacks and I've been asking myself, well, what did I do when this person said this to me, right? When I was at Drexel, what did I do when I was told that maybe if I tempered my emails that I would be more approachable to the students, or that if I smiled more, that the students would, like me more. I think I was told I'm not warm and fuzzy enough, those kinds of things. And I thought to myself, like, how did I handle those things? How did I get through those moments? And what could I learn from those experiences? Those to me are flashbacks. You all know, you've heard the terminology post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Well, when we're talking about both COVID-19 and we're talking about systemic racism, we're also talking about stress, continual traumatic stress disorder, and acute traumatic stress disorder, right? And that means that the stress that we're under can ultimately take a toll on us, right? So, Morgan, can you speak to Any flashbacks that you've had? Hmm. Yeah. And don't just say me. Like, we talking about stress.
Don't say you, babe.
I know I could be a doozy, right?
You're funny. Uh, I am a guy that thinks the glass is always half full. So I try not to get stuck in a place uh, of negativity. I'm not a pessimist. I'm an optimist. So for me, trust me, I feel the tension. I feel the heaviness, the weightiness that the world's experiencing right now. I mean, the racial unrest is absolutely just palpable. It's
scary.
thick. Yeah, it can be scary, and that's also bringing on a level of anxiety for everybody because now you clearly understand when you have the topics and conversations around defunding the police. And again, I've made a post before explaining the whole defunding police situation. It's not getting rid of the police; it's reallocating assets and dollars to go into a more, positive direction of social services that the community may need, which is not what the police is designed to do. They're not social workers, although there's an aspect of social work involved, but really certain things they don't need to be called on. So, I mean, it just, everything doesn't need a bludgeon, a billy club,
Right. Like
So-
the mentally challenged young guy last year.
They had no way to discern that and understand what he was to know, and he's trying to say certain things. They just trying to, apprehend him and subdue him. That's really not.
The social worker was with him and
Yeah,
said,
but-
telling them the
Yeah,
situation, and
right.
they still stopped the social worker.
Yeah. I don't know about that case. I haven't really.
That was last year.
Understand that, So it's palpable. So we have to really do our due diligence, and like you always mention, Art, self-care around making sure that you buffer yourself and figure out ways to meditation that we're doing, things to cleanse your spirit and your mind before you go out into the world to deal with this stuff. It's a serious situation. I mean, every day, all day, you're hearing story after story. There's this, the new meme of the Karenism of the world, and all these Karens out there, and the confrontations, and people are very, very short. And I had a situation when I was out the other day going to get some propane for our quarantined, socially distant 4th of July festivities, a situation where, a guy got cut off, and the white guy said something or made a remark, the brother turned around to the side and got out the car, and there's another altercation. I don't know. Would that have happened before COVID-19 and racial unrest? I don't know. It may have, may not have. Maybe the brother was brushed it off, kept on rolling. But now people are just not going to take stuff like that no more. And everything is through a lens, and we're hypersensitive about the racial tension. And you have to be mindful of that. You have to ask yourself, would I have let this go by in the past, or am I going to sit here and cause a big scene? And it's really a tough situation. So you have to be very mindful of how you're comporting yourself and how you're moving forward. We have so many things going on right now. But I got a question. I mean, I don't want to bring the heaviness, but I guess the question is, how would you how did we do anything fun? Were you able to get with your family and friends? I know we did, and just have some sort of socially distant, appropriate gathering of people that and loved ones. Again, small, intimate settings.
Responsibly.
Exactly.
Responsibly is the key.
Were you able to do that? No, we did that. My son decided to come spend a few days with us. He's here now, as a matter of fact, and that's a great thing. My daughter, my grandchild came over. My spiritual father, Gene, and Velva Jefferson came over. We all know that they've been safe and they're good and fine, and so we were able to love on each other. And it's been a great thing. But just curious to know how you guys' weekends have been. Did you have fun? How did you have fun? Did you love on people? Did you tell them you love them? That's a somewhat of a downer that this whole COVID-19 has really put upon us. socially distant has created a situation, especially if you're in the Christian church and you love about the Christian hug thing. You know, we are a touchy feeling.
People, you know, culturally, we're huggers and kissers and stuff. You know, we want to touch people.
And that's
you can't even see whether people are smiling or not if they have a mask on.
Yeah, that's gone. That's gone. You can't really give your loved ones and friends hugs. So people are missing that. Just curious to know if you guys have had that experience and what are you guys doing to kind of deal with that? Because that's a loss.
Right.
That's a loss.
Right.
That emotional connection, that physical connection, not just emotional, it's a physical connection that's lost. So anybody can have any words to share about how you be able to deal with that. I know we have a few comments that we're missing.
Let me read what Carla's saying.
Carla's saying something.
Carla says, she's talking about what I was saying with regards to corporate America. And she said, I completely agree. Companies asking their Black employees to write their BLM statements. The statements are meaningless without action. Let's see their supplier diversity statements, board makeup, a diverse upper management team, break down the racial makeup via salary bands. Great point, because all of it, we used to say it like this, and I know, Morgan, you would agree with this. Don't just talk the talk, walk the walk. Like words are powerful, but only powerful where there's action behind them. And so those statements, I'm sorry, Quaker Oats and the other organization with the Aunt Jemima different face on the bottle, syrup, or the syrup is probably not good for you anyway, but and whatever the Uncle Ben's rice, whatever. What does your administration and your higher executive team look like? Are women still making less money than men? Are Black people still making less money than white people? Are there no people at the higher level? Like, that's where the system needs to change. And so you got to start somewhere. So I'm not saying none of this is good. You just have to keep going. And if it's just a statement, but nothing changes, and quite frankly, for some of those organizations that I've heard about through my clients where there's been crickets, like nothing, no conversation at all, and more like there's a lot of people online. So when they're having meetings, this was right after the real erasure, right after like George Floyd's death, where there was a lot of rioting. And some of my clients were on Zoom calls on a Monday morning, and everybody's like, "Oh, how was your weekend?" And some of the other people, the white people, were like, "Oh yeah, I got some sun and everything was good." And there was one Black person on the call. This was for my client. Of course, I can't reveal names, but the person said, like, my weekend wasn't that great, quite frankly, and was having to process and unpack what that means to be working for an organization that continues in the midst of all of this overt racial unrest to render all of this what's happening invisible. That's kind of more of the same that we've already felt invisible. And so when I talk about like flashbacks, I think about going to conferences where I'd be in a lobby, for example, and somebody that I'd been in a conference with for a week that had been seeing me the whole time would walk up to me and say, "Do you work here?" And I'm like looking at her like, "You just came out of the workshop with me. Why would I be in the workshop and then working here in the hotel?" Not that there's anything wrong. These people who work in hotels are doing a great service for us. It just wasn't me, or I'd be called my colleague, Dr. Marlene Watson, and my hair looks like this, and Dr. Marlene Watson has, at the time, very long locks, and people would confuse us. Now, don't get me wrong, she's my hero, and I call her HT2, that stands for Harriet Tubman 2, but we don't look anything alike. But the implicit bias is that if there are two Black people in the space, they must be the same people. They couldn't be two separate people. And this would happen over and over and over again. And so that's problematic. So here's the thing about it, though. There is something that we can do together, right? We have to stay in the conversation and then move the needle to action. And that requires all of us, all hands on deck. White people, brown people, Black people, Native American people, everyone. we can do this because I believe that love trumps hate. But we have to stay in the conversation. We can't quit. Jessica says, good morning. I know it's a good morning when I wake and I feel great and get to see and hear you. Thank you. Thank you. And I hope you had a good and restful time off. Yes, we did. We did. We still work. Thank you too, Jessica. We appreciate it.
Yes.
So listen, when we think again about these conversations, it's what Carla helped us to remember, which is that we move the needle sometimes with these small conversations that can grow into big conversations. And our children are our future, right? These Gen Zs, these millennials. Now, I'm not, I'll be honest, sometimes I'm not a big millennial fan, right? Not that I don't love them, but sometimes the way in which they think is very different, but we got to bridge the gap. But what I am proud about is that the millennials and the Gen Zs have been out there protesting. They've been out there
sustained protesting.
Yes,
that's the key
sustaining the protest, forcing the agenda, making sure that we are not forgotten in the conversation. And as I think it was Cherry Gregg said, you know, her professor says that everybody has a space, and my pastor's been talking about that too, that everybody has a role. Everybody can be at the gate and have a different tool. Like if you all were on that service online yesterday, you got to determine what you're going to do, what your role is, what your tool is, and then you got to stay in it. You can't quit, right? And so all of us have a particular role in this fight. There are two fights that we are waging right now, two viruses, and both have super spreaders. And we have to continue to move the needle if we're going to eradicate both of them. So we got to stay in it. The Gen Zs, they're rocking it out. You know, the millennials, you know, part of what I like about them is they are not backing down. And they are saying, we absolutely, unequivocally deserve equal rights for all of us.
Well, what you're saying, you're actually seeing more white folks and allies protesting independent of us.
Yeah.
I mean, in certain areas, this is all a sea of white folks marching down Black Lives Matter signs. That's a serious paradigm shift.
That is a paradigm shift.
That is a cultural process in the mind and in the hearts and the spirits of people. And that's what you need. You know, you really need the overwhelming society, the majority of society, to really get behind it, to really move change. Systemic change is what we need. And we just are seeing the change. And what you're going to have high levels of intense opposition. Keyword intense. They are fighting for their very existence, for what they see it to be. And I mean, there's a whole lot to unravel and unpack all that. We don't have time to do all that. But listen, get this. How about you share with the audience what's coming up this week and what's great for the guests?
And Karen says truth. Yes. And Darlene's going, hey, good morning, Darlene. So
hey,
we are excited because on Wednesday, we are going to have our good friend, one of my besties, Charlie Lewis show. He is real estate.
Love the way you live, Charlie Lewis.
Love the way you live, Charlie Lewis. He is a real estate extraordinaire in New York City. So he's going to be talking about the changes there. But we're specifically, because the tagline this week is "Don't Quit." We're going to be talking about how has he managed to continue to stay in this fight, both individually, as a real estate agent, business owner, and also as the personality of Love the Way You Live in the Charlie Lewis Show. I mean, he has some great talent on his show, and we are going to be happy to have him and have this conversation on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, we're going to have Leah Love Avellini. She's the person that I actually was on a segment with maybe 6 months ago on the Tamron Hall Show. Very different conversation, because I think that conversation was about sex.
Yeah. And that it's a fun show.
It was.
I liked it.
It was good though. But she also posted something on IG a while ago that talked about the fact that, you know, Black Lives Matter, and that she is a white ally, and that none of us are free. Then if some of us are not free, then all of us are not free. And so we're going to have her on the conversation of, to talk about on the show, to talk about how do we specifically talk with white women, how do Black women and white women have a conversation, and then when she has children, so we'll talk about that as well, about racial healing, because this conversation is about healing. We have to, and moving the needle forward, it requires that we all heal from the injuries of our past so that we can move forward. In order to heal, you all know what I say, you have to feel, but you cannot heal what you do not reveal. Once we reveal it, then we have room to deal with it. So we are excited.
Yeah.
Our new platform is we're here on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. It gives us a little bit of a break in between.
Monday,
Wednesday, and Thursday.
Right. As we talked about Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
At 10 a.m. And then we'll be posting some other things along the way as well. So if you make sure, which we didn't say, to share this
your calendars. Don't forget that, because people, we were 4 days, so we're now
right. And we'll see how this platform, this routine works. Share this post, tag a friend, make sure that they know that we're on. Go on the YouTube page, hit the subscribe button, subscribe to Ask Dr. RG, AskDrArgie.
Smash that bell.
Right, hit the bell, notification bell. Also, you can type subscribe. If you're on Facebook, type subscribe into the message section, and so that you'll get some notifications and then respond to them. You'll get notifications on Facebook as well. And just look out for all of the other content that we have. We've got some really, really good content out there, and we'll repost some stuff that's relevant, and just look out for what we're doing in this space. We love you guys, right? And there's nothing you can do about it. So if nobody told you today that you're loved, we love you. And we will see you on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Have a beautiful day on purpose, from our hearts to yours.
See you guys.
Bye.